Welcome to the fourth installment of our comprehensive guide to the human design system. Today, we embark on a journey into a theme that is not only one of the most delightful subjects within this vast body of knowledge, but also one that offers a profound privilege. This is the theme of evolution, not as a historical concept confined to dusty textbooks, but as a living, breathing process that continues to unfold within and around us at this very moment. The knowledge contained within human design provides a unique lens, a mechanical framework through which we can observe this grand cosmic play. More than just observing, it offers us the potential to become conscious participants, to align ourselves with the evolutionary current as it carries humanity forward. This is not merely an intellectual exercise, it is an invitation to witness the mechanics of transformation as they happen, to understand our place within this grand unfolding narrative of what it means to be human. One of the most extraordinary revelations that the human design system brings to light is the clarity with which it maps the evolutionary transitions our species has undergone. It provides a detailed and mechanical explanation for the monumental shift that took place in our deep past, a transition that moved us from what we commonly refer to as our more primitive ancestors, the Neanderthals, to the emergence of what we consider the modern human being, Homo sapiens. However, human design does not rely on the familiar language of anthropology or archaeology. Instead, it presents this evolutionary story through a unique and precise vocabulary, the language of the energy centers that constitute our very being. By understanding the shift from a seven-centered being to a nine-centered one, we gain an unparalleled insight into the very architecture of our consciousness and the forces that have shaped our collective human experience. Before we delve into the specifics of the seven-centered being and its world, it is essential to first journey into the fundamental core of the human design knowledge to explore the deepest layers of its mechanics. This foundational understanding is crucial because it provides the context for everything that follows. It is akin to learning the alphabet before attempting to read a complex piece of literature. The story of our evolution is written in the language of cosmic mechanics, of celestial imprinting, and of the intricate interplay between consciousness and form. To truly grasp the magnitude of the change from a seven-centered to a nine-centered existence, we must first appreciate the architectural principles upon which all life, as described by human design, is built. This is where our exploration must begin, at the very source code of what it is to be alive. Our journey today is, therefore, a deep dive into our own history, but it is a history seen through a revelatory new perspective. It is about understanding that the world we have inherited, with all its cultures, philosophies, and societal structures, was built by a different kind of human. This exploration is designed to illuminate the profound differences between our ancestors and ourselves, not just in form, but in the very way we are designed to perceive and navigate reality. By appreciating the legacy of the seven-centered being, we can begin to see the conditioning forces that still operate in our world today. This awareness is the first step toward liberating ourselves from an outdated paradigm and stepping fully into the potential of what we, as nine-centered beings, are here to become in this remarkable evolutionary epoch. To truly comprehend the evolutionary leap we are about to discuss, we must first look at the heart of the human design mandala. At the very center of this intricate wheel, you will find a simple yet profound illustration, a triangle, bisected down the middle. This seemingly basic geometric shape represents the core of what life truly is, cognition. Life, in its essence, is a process of cognitive awareness, of perceiving and interpreting the universe. We can journey to the most profound levels of this knowledge, into the specialized fields of primary health system and rave psychology, to understand the intricate mechanics that lie beneath the surface of what we see in a standard human design chart. Beneath every one of the 64 gates and their 6 lines, there exists a deeper, more subtle architecture composed of color, tone, and base, each carrying a unique and vital interpretive value for our analysis. This substructure provides the blueprint for our individual nature. When we examine these layers, we see a fascinating geometric progression. Color, for instance, is associated with a 6-sided structure, reflecting its 6 variations. Base is associated with a 5-sided structure, corresponding to the 5 building blocks of the genetic code. But it is tone that holds a special significance for our current discussion. Tone is represented by a triangle, a 3-sided form. This is not just any triangle, its dimensional structure is a perfect microcosm of the larger triangle that forms the cognitive core of the rave mandala itself. This fractal relationship, where the part reflects the whole, is a key principle in understanding the architecture of our being. The triangle of tone is the microcosm that informs the macrocosm of the body graph, the schematic of our human vehicle. When we speak of tone, we are speaking of the fundamental architecture of our human construct. It is the underlying framework that determines not only how we are designed to operate as conscious beings interacting with the world on this physical plane, but also how all of our internal systems are meant to function correctly. Tone is the architectural plan for both our inner and outer worlds, governing the very quality of our sensory perception and cognitive awareness. It is the bedrock upon which our potential for awareness is built, dictating the specific sensory apparatus through which we are designed to connect with reality. This tonal architecture is the source code for our cognitive potential, influencing everything from our digestion to the way our brain processes information. This deep mechanical framework is where the story of our evolution, from a seven-centered to a nine-centered being, truly begins. The shifts and mutations that have defined our species' journey are not random occurrences but are deeply encoded within this underlying architecture. The changes in our energy centers, our awareness, and our way of being are all reflections of a fundamental mutation within this cognitive blueprint. By understanding this foundational layer of color, tone, and bass, we move beyond simple descriptions of human behavior and into the realm of pure mechanics. We can see how the very structure of our perception has evolved, setting the stage for the dramatic transition that reshaped humanity and gave birth to the complex world we inhabit today. Let us return to that central triangle at the heart of the mandala, the one representing the core of cognition. A line runs directly down its center, cleaving it into two distinct halves. This line is not merely a graphic element, it is a profound line in the sand, a demarcation that separates our evolutionary past from our evolutionary future. On the left side of this divide, we find the legacy of what has been, the ancient and established ways of being. On the right side, we find the emergent potential, the new and evolving form of consciousness that is our future. As modern humans, we find ourselves caught directly in the middle of this great divide. We are a transitional species carrying the remnants of the old left-sided past, while simultaneously embodying the nascent beginnings of what the right-sided future is all about. This division between left and right is not just a theoretical concept, it maps directly onto the architecture of our being and the very way our brains and sensory systems are designed to operate. Our exploration will take us through the various configurations and what happens as evolution moves across this divide. But to truly grasp the significance of this movement, we must first understand the pervasive influence of the past. The civilization we have built, the cultures we inhabit, and the homogenized consciousness that permeates our modern world. The way most people are taught to think, to see, and to value things, all stem from one side of this divide. And here, I must introduce a concept that may seem heretical, even shocking. Nearly everything you have been taught, every societal norm and value, comes from the consciousness of another species. It is the legacy of a being that is not us. So where does this captivating and mysterious journey into our past begin? It begins with that very line running down the center of the tonal triangle, the line that separates the left from the right. In the simplest and most direct terms, the left is strategic. To see this reflected in our own vehicle, imagine drawing a line down the middle of the human design body graph. If you look at the left side of the chart, what you will predominantly see is the splenic center. The spleen is our most ancient awareness center, a primal intelligence that predates even our upright posture. Its roots stretch back into the deepest recesses of our biological history, a time when survival was the only imperative. This ancient center is the foundation upon which our oldest survival mechanisms are built, a place of instinct, intuition, and deep-seated fear. The splenic system is the home of our immune system, the body's vigilant guardian, and a source of well-being when it is healthy. However, its core function is survival, and to ensure survival, it operates through the intelligence of fear. Every conceivable existential fear resides within the gates of the splenic center. The fear of inadequacy, the fear of the past, the fear of the future, the fear of failure, the fear of responsibility, the fear of authority, and the ultimate fear of death. Yet these fears are not meant to be paralyzing. They are the catalysts for intelligence. They are the raw data that our survival mechanism processes to develop strategies for navigating a dangerous world. This is the origin of strategic intelligence, an intelligence born from fear and oriented towards control and mastery of the environment. This strategic intelligence, rooted in the primal fears of the splenic center, did not remain isolated. Evolution forged a powerful connection between this ancient survival awareness and the conceptualizing awareness of the ajna center. The ajna, our center for processing ideas and concepts, is something that can only be identified with us, the human family tree. The relationship between the spleen and the ajna reveals how our intelligence, the ability to defend ourselves, to find food, to survive and thrive, became overwhelmingly oriented in a visual and strategic manner. The left, the strategic path of our ancestors, is fundamentally linked to outer vision. It is an intelligence that looks out into the world, assesses threats and opportunities, and formulates a plan of action. This outer vision possesses a unique quality and value that became the cornerstone of our species' success. Think of us as creatures on the savannah. We are not particularly fast compared to a cheetah, nor are we strong like a bear. In our early years, we are incredibly vulnerable and dependent. As predators, we cannot physically overpower most of the large animals in our environment. Our primary advantage has always been our intelligence, an intelligence that was profoundly amplified by an unusual evolutionary gift, our eyes. The mutation that moved our eyes from the sides of our head to the front was a game changer. This development gave us binocular vision, a truly extraordinary capacity. It allows us to perceive depth, to pinpoint the precise location of objects in a relative three-dimensional space. This visual dimensionality became the canvas upon which our strategic minds could paint their plans. It was this ability to see the world with such depth and clarity that allowed us to formulate complex strategies. We could accurately judge the distance to that deer we needed to hunt for the tribe to eat. We could observe the behavior of predators from a safe distance and devise ways to avoid them. This visual acuity, this ability to establish a clear field of play, was the foundation for clever, coordinated action. But vision alone was not enough. Our true power emerged when this visual intelligence was combined with another remarkable ability, the capacity to communicate at a deeply nuanced and complex level. Everything about our ancestral roots and our rise to dominance as a species is built upon these twin pillars of superior vision and sophisticated communication. Around 85,000 years ago, another extraordinary mutation occurred, located in the 12th gate of the human design chart. This mutation resulted in what is known as the dropping of the larynx. Before this, our ancestors, much like modern primates, could breathe and drink simultaneously. Human infants retain this ability for the first 8 or 9 months of their lives. Then, the ancient mutation kicks in, the larynx descends, and this ability is lost. But in its place, something magnificent emerges, the capacity for the highly articulated and modulated sounds that form the basis of complex language. It is this ability that allows me to share these concepts with you now. The beings who possessed this dropped larynx, who combined it with their powerful binocular vision, were the seven-centered beings. They dominated this planet for millennia, and their story is not our story. Those beings who carried the mutation for the dropped larynx, the ones whose reign began over 85,000 years ago, were the seven-centered humans. Their time on this plane, according to the knowledge of human design, came to a formal close in the year 1781. In fact, due to natural lifespans, they likely walked the earth until the late 1800s. It is crucial to grasp this. These beings are not us. They were a different species. Many spiritual and philosophical traditions, particularly those with roots in the East like the Hindu Brahmanic chakra system, are based on an understanding of this seven-centered vehicle. When you look at traditional illustrations of the 7 major chakras, you are looking at the energetic blueprint of our direct ancestors. This was their form, their reality, their world. The seven-centered being was a creature of the left. They were overwhelmingly strategic, focused, and driven by the fear-based intelligence of the spleen. Their entire orientation was to conquer the environment, to control nature, to secure their survival through strategic mastery. If we look back at the grand evolutionary pattern, we see a pendulum swinging between left and right. The Neanderthals, who preceded the seven-centered humans, were a more right-oriented, receptive species. They were supplanted and ultimately replaced by the strategically superior, left-oriented seven-centered being. They were so successful that they built the entire foundation of what we call civilization. All of our major religions, our political systems, our philosophies, and our moral codes were conceived and established by them. The year 1781 marks a pivotal turning point in the history of our species. This was the year that the astronomer William Herschel discovered the planet Uranus. According to the information given with the Human Design System, this celestial event coincided with a global mutation. It was at this moment that the first 9-centered beings began to be born onto this plane. Since 1781, every single human being born has been a 9-centered being. We are a new model. The reason 7-centered beings persisted into the late 19th century is simply a matter of lifespan. A child born in 1780 who lived to be 100 would have passed away in 1880. But the production line of the old model was shut down permanently in 1781. This is the great dividing line. The moment you truly grasp this, a profound realization dawns. We are not exclusively left-oriented creatures. While we still possess leftness as part of our heritage and our individual design, we also have a fully developed potential for rightness. We are a far more complex and nuanced form of life. This complexity, however, presents us with a terrible dilemma. The emerging rightness that has been a part of our genetic makeup since 1781 has been almost completely overwhelmed and suppressed by the conditioning and programming left behind by the 7-centered species. We are born as 9-centered beings into a 7-centered world, a world whose rules, expectations, and systems were not designed for us. We are living in a house built for someone else, and it is a house built on a foundation of fear and strategic control. To truly comprehend the evolutionary leap we are about to discuss, we must first look at the heart of the human design mandala. At the very center of this intricate wheel, you will find a simple yet profound illustration, a triangle, bisected down the middle. This seemingly basic geometric shape represents the core of what life truly is, cognition. Life, in its essence, is a process of cognitive awareness, of perceiving and interpreting the universe. We can journey to the most profound levels of this knowledge, into the specialized fields of primary health system, or PHS, and rave psychology, to understand the intricate mechanics that lie beneath the surface of what we see in a standard human design chart. Beneath every one of the 64 gates and their 6 lines, there exists a deeper, more subtle architecture composed of color, tone, and base, each carrying a unique and vital interpretive value for our analysis. This substructure provides the blueprint for our individual nature. When we examine these layers, we see a fascinating geometric progression. Color, for instance, is associated with a 6-sided structure reflecting its 6 variations. Base is associated with a 5-sided structure corresponding to the 5 building blocks of the genetic code, but it is tone that holds a special significance for our current discussion. Tone is represented by a triangle, a 3-sided form. This is not just any triangle. Its dimensional structure is a perfect microcosm of the larger triangle that forms the cognitive core of the rave mandala itself. This fractal relationship, where the part reflects the whole, is a key principle in understanding the architecture of our being. The triangle of tone is the microcosm that informs the macrocosm of the body graph, the schematic of our human vehicle. When we speak of tone, we are speaking of what can be described as the fundamental architecture of our human construct. It is the underlying framework that determines not only how we are designed to operate as conscious beings, interacting with the world on this physical plane, but also how all of our internal systems are meant to function correctly. Tone is the architectural plan for both our inner and outer worlds, governing the very quality of our sensory perception and cognitive awareness. It is the bedrock upon which our potential for awareness is built, dictating the specific sensory apparatus through which we are designed to connect with reality. This tonal architecture is the source code for our cognitive potential, influencing everything from our digestion to the way our brain processes information. This deep mechanical framework is where the story of our evolution from a 7-centered to a 9-centered being truly begins. The shifts and mutations that have defined our species' journey are not random occurrences but are deeply encoded within this underlying architecture. The changes in our energy centers, our awareness, and our way of being are all reflections of a fundamental mutation within this cognitive blueprint. By understanding this foundational layer of color, tone, and base, we move beyond simple descriptions of human behavior and into the realm of pure mechanics. We can see how the very structure of our perception has evolved, setting the stage for the dramatic transition that reshaped humanity and gave birth to the complex world we inhabit today. Let us return our focus to that central triangle at the heart of the Rav mandala, the one representing the core of cognition. A line runs directly down its center, cleaving it into two distinct halves. This line is not merely a graphic element, it is a profound line in the sand, a demarcation that separates our evolutionary past from our evolutionary future. On the left side of this divide, we find the legacy of what has been, the ancient and established ways of being that carried our species through millennia of survival. On the right side, we find the emergent potential, the new and evolving form of consciousness that is our future. As modern humans, as nine-centered beings, we find ourselves caught directly in the middle of this great divide, a fascinating and often challenging position to be in. We are a transitional species, carrying the remnants of the old left-sided past while simultaneously embodying the nascent beginnings of what the right-sided future is all about. This division between left and right is not just a theoretical or philosophical concept, it maps directly onto the architecture of our being and the very way our brains and sensory systems are designed to operate. Our exploration will take us through the various configurations and what happens as evolution moves across this divide. But to truly grasp the significance of this movement, we must first understand the pervasive influence of the past, the civilization we have built, the cultures we inhabit, and the homogenized consciousness that permeates our modern world. The way most people are taught to think, to see, and to value things, all stem from one side of this divide. And here, I must introduce a concept that may seem heretical, even shocking. Nearly everything you have been taught, every societal norm and value, comes from the consciousness of another species. It is the legacy of a being that is not us. So, where does this captivating and mysterious journey into our past begin? It begins with that very line running down the center of the tonal triangle, the line that separates the left from the right. In the simplest and most direct terms, the left is strategic. To see this reflected in our own vehicle, imagine drawing a line down the middle of the human design body graph. If you look at the left side of the chart, what you will predominantly see is the splenic center. The spleen is our most ancient awareness center, a primal intelligence that predates even our upright posture. Its roots stretch back into the deepest recesses of our biological history, a time when survival was the only imperative. This ancient center is the foundation upon which our oldest survival mechanisms are built, a place of instinct, intuition, and deep-seated fear. It is this strategic, left-oriented consciousness that built the world we have inherited. The seven-centered beings, our direct ancestors, were masters of this strategic way of life. Their entire existence was geared towards planning, calculating, and controlling their environment to ensure their survival and dominance. The remnants of this strategic imperative are all around us, embedded in our educational systems, our corporate structures, our political ideologies, and even our personal ambitions. Understanding this is not about placing blame or judgment, it is about recognizing the mechanical origins of the world's operating system. It is about seeing that the software we are all running was written for a different kind of hardware, and that this mismatch is the source of immense pressure, confusion, and dysfunction in the modern world. The splenic system, located on the left side of the body graph, is the oldest and most fundamental of our three awareness centers. It is ancient, its intelligence deeply woven into the fabric of our biology, going back to a time before our species even walked upright. While we often associate the spleen with the immune system, the lymphatic system, and a general sense of well-being, its core function is much more primal. The thing to truly grasp about the splenic system is that this is the body's basic survival mechanism. It is the vigilant lookout, the silent guardian that is constantly scanning the environment for threats. And to perform this vital function, it operates on a singular, powerful fuel: fear. It is the very home of fear, and it contains multitudes of it. Every kind of existential fear that you can imagine has its roots in the gates of the splenic center. There is the fear of inadequacy, the fear of tomorrow, the fear of the past haunting the present, and the profound fear of failure. It houses the fear of taking on responsibility and the fear of authority figures who hold power over us. And of course, it holds the ultimate fear that underlies all others, the fear of death, the awareness of our own mortality that arises for each and every one of us. All of these fears, and many more, are housed within the splenic system. But these fears are not a mistake or a flaw in our design. On the contrary, they are the very catalysts that give rise to a specific and powerful form of intelligence. It is our survival mechanism working exactly as it should. What these fears lead to is a strategic intelligence. The constant, low-grade anxiety about what could go wrong tomorrow pushes the mind to plan. The fear of inadequacy drives the ambition to acquire skills and resources. The fear of authority compels one to understand and navigate social hierarchies. Each fear is a data point that feeds a complex, calculating intelligence designed for one purpose: to keep the organism alive and secure. This is the essence of the strategic way. It is an intelligence that looks out at the world, identifies potential dangers, and then formulates a plan, a strategy, to mitigate those dangers and gain an advantage. This is the bedrock of the consciousness that dominated our planet for tens of thousands of years. As we look deeper into the inner architecture of cognition, at the level of tone, we see this principle reinforced. The entire left side of the cognitive triangle is dedicated to this strategic function. It's also important to note that when you bisect the body graph, you are also, in a sense, cutting the ajna center in half. The left and right sides of the ajna center are universes apart in their function and orientation. The left side of the ajna works in concert with the spleen, taking the raw, fear-based data and conceptualizing it into actionable plans. This is where a unique and powerful mutation took place, forging a link that would allow this strategic intelligence to shape the world in its own image, laying the foundation for the seven-centered being's rise to dominance. This strategic intelligence, rooted in the primal fears of the splenic center, did not remain an isolated instinctual force. Evolution forged a powerful and transformative connection between this ancient survival awareness and the conceptualizing awareness of the ajna center. The ajna, our center for processing ideas, forming opinions, and constructing mental frameworks, is an awareness that can only be identified with us, the human family tree. The relationship that developed between the spleen and the ajna reveals how our intelligence, the ability to defend ourselves, to find food, to survive and thrive, became overwhelmingly oriented in a visual and strategic manner. The left, the strategic path of our ancestors, is fundamentally linked to what we call outer vision. It is an intelligence that looks out into the world, assesses threats and opportunities, and formulates a plan of action. Think of us as creatures on the open savanna, surrounded by predators and prey. We are not particularly fast compared to a cheetah, nor are we as strong as a bear. In our early years, we are incredibly vulnerable and dependent on the tribe for our very survival. As hunters and gatherers, we cannot physically overpower most of the large animals in our environment. Our primary advantage has always been our intelligence. An intelligence that was profoundly and uniquely amplified by an incredible evolutionary gift: our eyes. The mutation that moved our eyes from the sides of our head to the front was a biological game-changer of monumental proportions. This development gave us binocular vision, a truly extraordinary capacity that set us apart from most other creatures on the planet. This binocular vision is an incredible thing, is it not? What it allows us to do is perceive depth, to pinpoint the precise location of objects within a relative three-dimensional space. This visual dimensionality became the canvas upon which our strategic minds could paint their plans for survival and conquest. It was this remarkable ability to see the world with such depth and clarity that allowed us to formulate complex strategies. We could accurately judge the distance to that deer we needed to hunt for the tribe to eat. We could observe the behavior of predators from a safe distance and devise clever ways to avoid them or even turn the tables on them. This visual acuity, this capacity to establish a clear field of play, was the absolute foundation for coordinated, intelligent, and ultimately successful action. It is out of that very dimensionality that we were able to figure out how to deal with any object in its relative space. The plans that were then made because of the visual input established not just a field of play, but a way of taking action that was far more sophisticated than that of any other species. Everything about our ancestral roots, everything about the way in which a species with our physical limitations rose to the top of the food chain, is rooted in our ability to intellectually leverage this visual power. We became a clever species, capable of outthinking our competition, but vision alone, as powerful as it was only one half of the equation that led to our dominance. It needed a partner to become fully actualized. Our true power as a species emerged when this superior visual intelligence was combined with another remarkable ability: the capacity to communicate at a deeply nuanced and complex level. Around 85,000 years ago, an extraordinary mutation took place, located in the 12th gate of the human design chart. This mutation resulted in what is known in physiology as the dropping of the larynx. If you look at one of our closest primate relatives, a chimpanzee, you will see that it is able to drink and breathe at the same time. This is an ability that is shared by human infants for the first 8 or 9 months of their lives. You can observe this in a nursing child, who can drink and breathe simultaneously without any issue. This anatomical configuration, however, limits the range of sounds that can be produced. Then, at around 8 or 9 months of age, the ancient mutation that first appeared 85,000 years ago suddenly kicks in within the developing child. The moment that this mutation activates, something extraordinary happens. The baby begins to spit up as the larynx drops into a lower position in the throat. This descent stops the ability to drink and breathe at the same time, which is why we can choke on our drinks if we are not careful. But this apparent disadvantage comes with a magnificent trade-off. This new anatomical position opens up the pharyngeal cavity, creating a resonating chamber that allows for the incredible capacity that you are getting from me right now, the articulation and modulation of sound into complex language. If you go right back to the beginning of our human story, everything about us, everything about our success, has been based on these two fundamental pillars. First, our ability to see the world with the depth and focus of binocular vision, allowing us to plan and strategize. Second, our ability to communicate with each other with incredible precision, this capacity to enunciate complex thoughts that arose from the dropping of the larynx. This combination allowed us to establish what we call language. But it was a language that could provide so much detailed information. When you combine that rich communicative ability with our profound visual acuity, we were then able to coordinate our actions and effectively control our environment in a way no species had ever done before. The beings who had this dropped larynx, those beings that emerged over 85,000 years ago, were the seven-centered beings. They were the ones who carried this powerful combination of strategic vision and complex speech. This potent toolkit allowed them to organize into larger groups, to pass down knowledge from one generation to the next, and to execute intricate plans for hunting, building, and defending themselves. They were, in essence, the first masters of strategic communication. These were the beings who lived on this plane until the great evolutionary shift of 1781. And it is vital to understand that while they are our ancestors, they are not us. They were a different kind of human, operating with a different energetic blueprint. Many of you who have been involved in the study of yoga or the chakra systems, and any of you who are familiar with Eastern philosophies, particularly those that have arisen out of India, will recognize the seven-centered model. It was the Brahmins who first brought this deep understanding of their vehicle as being a seven-centered construct into a codified system. And if you look at all the traditional illustrations of the chakra system, though there are, in fact, in those elaborate teachings many minor chakras, the reality is that they are all based on the primary seven-centered system. This was the blueprint of the human being that dominated this planet for the vast majority of our history. This seven-centered being, whose era began around 85,000 years ago, came to an end in 1781 when the first nine-centered beings began to emerge. These seven-centered beings dominated the world, and they dominated it through their inherent leftness. Let's go back to that central triangle of cognition and the way it is cut down the center. The fact is that throughout our evolutionary history, we have been moving in a great pendulum swing from left to right and back again over vast periods of time. If we go back to the so-called Neanderthal, our more ancient predecessors, we see that the Neanderthal was a right-oriented, receptive creature. They were a more passive, communal form of life that was ultimately and easily supplanted by the more aggressive and organized left-oriented creature that followed them. The seven-centered being was the pinnacle of left-oriented strategic consciousness. As you will discover throughout this journey, we, the nine-centered beings, are a transitionary form. We are a bridge, caught between the strategic past of the seven-centered being and a receptive future that is still coming into form. But for now, let's stay focused on that past for a moment. Let's go back to these seven-centered beings. According to the knowledge that I was given, when the astronomer William Herschel discovered the planet Uranus in 1781, a global mutation was triggered, and the first of the nine-centered beings began to come onto this plane. Since that date, nine-centered beings have been the only type of human being born into the world. The old model was discontinued. My earlier comment that the seven-centered being was here until the late 1800s is simply a matter of accounting for lifespans. Any child born in, let's say, 1780, if they were fortunate enough to live 100 years, which was rather rare in that era, would mean that the last seven-centered being may have left this plane in the 1870s or the 1880s, but the definitive marking point for the evolutionary shift is 1781. This was the end of the zone, the end of the dominance of the seven-centered being. The moment that you grasp the reality of this transition, you can begin to see our modern dilemma. We are not a left-oriented creature. Yes, we have leftness, but we also have rightness. We are much more complex, and we are caught in a world built by and for our strategic ancestors. To truly comprehend the world we have inherited, we must first journey back in time, not just through history books, but through the very mechanics of our cognitive architecture. The human design system provides an extraordinary map for this journey, and it begins with the fundamental division between left and right. This is not a political or social distinction, but a deep mechanical one that defines the very nature of awareness. The left represents the strategic, focused, and active principle. It is the path of the doer, the planner, the conqueror. When we look at the grand arc of human evolution, we see that our immediate ancestors, the seven-centered beings, were creatures entirely of the left. Their consciousness, their societies, and their entire way of life were built upon the foundation of strategic intelligence, a way of being that was essential for their survival and eventual dominance on this planet. This strategic orientation is not an abstract concept, it is physically and energetically rooted in the human design body graph. If you were to draw a line down the center of the chart, you would see that the left side is dominated by the splenic center, our most ancient source of awareness. This center is intimately connected to the left side of the ajna center, the hub of our conceptualizing mind. This circuitry represents the flow of information from primal instinctual awareness to calculated strategic thought. It is the pathway through which fear is transformed into plans, and survival instinct is elevated to complex problem-solving. This left-hand path was the exclusive operating system for the seven-centered being, shaping their perception, their actions, and the very world they constructed around themselves. Everything about the seven-centered being was exclusively oriented to the strategic. Their success as a species was predicated on their ability to manipulate the environment, to outwit predators, and to organize themselves for collective action. This required a mind that was constantly calculating, assessing risks, and formulating plans. It was a consciousness designed to triumph over everything and anything that stood in its way, to climb to the top of the food chain and declare its mastery over the natural world. This strategic drive is the legacy we have inherited. The foundations of our civilizations, our sciences, our economic systems, and our military structures are all byproducts of this relentless, left-oriented focus on control and strategic advantage. It is the echo of a different kind of human. Understanding this is crucial because it reveals the source of the conditioning that permeates our modern world. We, as nine-centered beings, are born into a system that was built by and for a strategic species. We are educated to think strategically, rewarded for competing strategically, and encouraged to live our lives according to strategic plans. Yet, this is only half of our potential story. To see the world clearly, we must first recognize that the rules of the game were written by a different player, a player whose entire being was dedicated to the art of strategy. By seeing the world of the seven-centered being for what it was, we can begin to untangle ourselves from its powerful and often limiting legacy. At the very heart of this strategic left-oriented consciousness lies the splenic center. This is our oldest and most primal awareness center, an ancient intelligence that has been part of our biological makeup since long before we became human. It is the raw, instinctual foundation of our physical existence, responsible for the health of our immune system and our fundamental sense of well-being. But its most critical role, from an evolutionary perspective, is survival. The spleen is the body's vigilant guardian, constantly scanning the environment for anything that might pose a threat to its existence. To perform this relentless task, it operates through a powerful and essential medium, fear. The splenic center is the veritable home of fear, housing a vast spectrum of anxieties that have ensured our species' continuation. Every kind of fear that you can possibly imagine resides within the gates of this ancient center. There is the fear of inadequacy, the fear of failure, and the fear of taking on responsibility. There is the fear of the past, and the deep, nagging fear of what tomorrow might bring. There is the fear of authority, and the ultimate underlying fear of death itself, the final cessation of being. All of these fears, and their many subtle variations, are not design flaws or psychological weaknesses. They are, in fact, the very catalysts for intelligence. They are the raw data that the strategic mind uses to stay one step ahead of danger. These fears are the engine that drives the seven-centered being's primary directive: to survive, to secure its place, and to control its destiny through sheer force of intellect. It is directly from these fears that strategic intelligence is born. The fear of tomorrow compels the mind to plan and save. The fear of inadequacy drives the acquisition of skills and power. The fear of failure pushes one to calculate every move with precision. Each fear is a spark that ignites the analytical mind, forcing it to develop strategies to overcome perceived threats. This fear-based intelligence is what allowed our ancestors to move from being vulnerable creatures in a hostile world to becoming the planet's apex predators. It is a powerful and effective mechanism for survival, but it is a mechanism that demands constant vigilance and a focus on what could go wrong. It creates a consciousness that is always on guard, always looking for the next problem to solve. For the seven-centered being, this was not a choice, it was their nature. Their entire world was defined by the relationship between the fears of the spleen and the conceptualizing power of their mind. They were here to use their fear to drive their intelligence, and to use that intelligence to control their world. Whether that world was a small tribal territory or a vast empire, the underlying principle was the same. Identify the threat, formulate a strategy, and execute the plan to neutralize it. This is the strategic way, a way of life that knows no other path. It is a powerful legacy, but it is a profoundly limited one, and it is crucial to recognize that it is not what we, as nine-centered beings, are here for. The strategic intelligence born from the spleen's fears found its perfect partner in a remarkable physical mutation: the development of binocular vision. If we consider our species from a purely physical standpoint, well, we're not overwhelmingly impressive. We're not the fastest runners, the strongest fighters, or the most resilient creatures on the planet. For much of our early lives, we're incredibly vulnerable and dependent. Our primary advantage, the tool that allowed us to rise above our physical limitations, has always been our intelligence. And this intelligence was given a powerful lens through which to view the world when our eyes evolved from the sides of our head to the front, granting us the extraordinary gift of three-dimensional sight. This binocular vision was an incredible evolutionary leap. It fundamentally changed how we perceived and interacted with our environment. For the first time, a creature could look out at the world and see it not just as a flat plane, but as a space with depth, distance, and dimension. This ability to pinpoint the precise location of an object in a relative space was a game-changer for a strategic species. It allowed for the accurate throwing of a spear, the judging of a leap across a chasm, and the careful assessment of a predator's distance. The world became a field of play, a chessboard upon which the strategic mind could plot its moves with newfound precision and confidence. It is out of this visual dimensionality that our ancestors were able to formulate complex plans and take decisive action. That deer the tribe needed for its survival was no longer just a shape in the distance. It was an object at a specific, calculable range, moving at an observable speed. This visual data fed directly into the strategic mind, allowing for the creation of sophisticated hunting strategies that required coordination, timing, and a shared understanding of the spatial environment. The visual field established the parameters for action, and our intelligence provided the means to exploit that advantage. This powerful combination of focused, binocular vision and a strategic mind was the key that unlocked our species' potential to control its surroundings. Everything about our roots as a successful species, everything about how we overcame our physical limitations, is tied to this unique synergy. Our ability to see the world with such clarity and depth provided the raw information, and our strategic intelligence processed that information into plans for survival and dominance. This created a clever and formidable creature, one that could outthink its prey and its predators. The world was no longer just a place to react to, it became a place to act upon. This visual mastery was the first pillar of the seven-centered being's power, but it needed one more component to achieve its full, world-shaping potential. The second pillar that established the dominance of the seven-centered being was another extraordinary mutation, one that revolutionized communication. Around 85,000 years ago, a change occurred in our anatomy known as the dropping of the larynx. Before this, our ancestors, like modern primates and human infants, could drink and breathe at the same time. This anatomical arrangement, while efficient for sustenance, severely limits the range and complexity of sounds that can be produced. Then, evolution introduced a trade-off. The larynx descended in the throat, creating a larger pharyngeal cavity. This change made us susceptible to choking, but in return, it gave us the priceless gift of a highly articulated voice. It gave us the ability to modulate sound with incredible nuance and precision. This mutation, located in the 12th gate in the human design system, was the key to unlocking complex language. The visual strategies formulated in the mind could now be communicated to others with unprecedented clarity and detail. The hunt for the mammoth was no longer a matter of simple grunts and gestures. It could now be a fully articulated plan. You will circle around from the left, while your group creates a diversion from the right, and we will wait for my signal to attack. This ability to enunciate, to share complex concepts and coordinate intricate actions was the force multiplier for our visual and strategic intelligence. It allowed for the formation of larger, more organized social groups and the transmission of knowledge across generations. When you combine the acuity of binocular vision with the power of a nuanced spoken language, you create a species capable of controlling its environment on a massive scale. This is the foundation of our success. The ability to see a problem with clarity and then communicate a detailed, strategic solution to a group is what allowed us to build shelters, domesticate animals, cultivate land, and defend ourselves against any threat. The seven-centered beings were the first to wield this potent combination, and they used it to spread across the globe and reshape the planet to suit their needs. Their voice was not just for sharing stories, it was a tool of command, a mechanism for organizing their strategic will into collective power. These beings, armed with sharp eyes and sharp tongues, were the ones who laid the groundwork for all of human civilization. Their ability to communicate strategically allowed them to build hierarchies, establish laws, and create the complex social structures that still define our world today. They were able to turn their fear-driven intelligence into a collective force that was unstoppable. The dropping of the larynx was not just a change in anatomy, it was the birth of the command structure, the beginning of top-down organization, and the final piece of the puzzle that made the seven-centered being the undisputed master of the strategic way. Their world was built on the power of their focused vision and their commanding voice. With the power of focused binocular vision and the communicative force of a dropped larynx, the seven-centered being emerged as the apex predator of strategy. For over 80,000 years, this was the form that humanity took, a being perfectly designed to conquer a hostile world through intellect and organization. Their entire energetic system, with its 7 primary centers, was geared towards this purpose. The fear from the spleen fueled the strategic mind in the ajna, which then used the throat center to articulate commands and coordinate the tribe. This was a closed loop of survival-oriented intelligence, a highly efficient machine for imposing order on chaos. It was their nature to control, to dominate, and to build systems that would ensure their security and prosperity. The civilizations they built were a direct reflection of their strategic nature. They created religions with strict moral codes to control behavior, governments with rigid hierarchies to maintain order, and armies to conquer their enemies and secure resources. Everything was about creating a predictable and controllable world, a world where the fears of the spleen could be managed through external structures and strategic planning. This is not a criticism, it is a mechanical fact. They were playing out the perfection of their design, and they were incredibly successful at it. They built empires, developed sciences, and created philosophies that explored the power and potential of the strategic mind. They were the masters of their domain. This era of the seven-centered being continued uninterrupted until the year 1781. This date marks a profound turning point in human evolution, coinciding with the discovery of the planet Uranus. According to the mechanics of human design, this was the moment when the evolutionary program shifted. The production of seven-centered beings ceased, and a new model began to emerge, the nine-centered being. Since 1781, every human born has carried this new, more complex energetic blueprint. We are fundamentally different from the ancestors who built the world we live in. While they were specialists in focused, strategic consciousness, we are designed for a much broader and more receptive form of awareness. This transition is the source of one of the greatest challenges facing humanity today. The seven-centered beings are gone, but their world remains. Their philosophies, their religions, their societal structures, and their deep-seated belief in the supremacy of the strategic mind are all still here. We are nine-centered beings living in a seven-centered museum, trying to operate with a new and different internal guidance system, while being told that the old maps are the only ones that are valid. We are a new species attempting to navigate our lives using the outdated rulebook of our predecessors, a rulebook written entirely in the language of fear and strategy. The legacy of the seven-centered being is, well, the world you see around you. It's a world built on the premise that the mind, with its capacity for strategic thought, is the ultimate tool for survival and success. From the moment we're born, we're taught to be afraid and then to use that fear to motivate us, to plan, to compete, and to control our lives. The educational systems, they're designed to train strategic minds, rewarding those who can focus, memorize, and regurgitate information in a linear fashion. And let's be honest, the corporate world is basically a battlefield of strategies, where success gets measured by the ability to outmaneuver the competition. Our political and social systems, they're vast, complex mechanisms of control, all designed to manage the masses through laws and homogenized ideologies. This is the trap for the modern human. We're born as nine-centered beings, equipped with the potential for a new kind of awareness, yet we are almost immediately plunged into a conditioning field that relentlessly pressures us to operate like our seven-centered ancestors. We're told that our minds are our most valuable asset, and that we must use them to figure everything out, to make decisions, and to secure our future. We're told to focus, to have a plan, to set goals, and to conquer our fears. This is the mantra of the strategic world. But for the nine-centered being, this is honestly a recipe for deep inner conflict, anxiety, and a profound sense of not-self, a feeling that something is fundamentally wrong with the way we are living. The mutation that brought us into being was not about making us better strategists. It was about opening us up to a different way of being, a way that's not exclusively driven by fear and focus. We are, in a sense, a transitionary species, a bridge between the strategic past and a receptive future. We carry the old left-sided potential within us, but we also carry the new right-sided potential for a more holistic, passive, and absorbing awareness. Our dilemma is that the entire world is screaming at us to only use the left side, to ignore the emergent rightness that is the true key to our unique potential and well-being. We're taught to be warriors in a world that is actually calling for us to become witnesses. Therefore, the rise of intelligence that defined the seven-centered being, an intelligence forged in the fires of splenic fear and honed by the focused lens of binocular vision, is both our inheritance and our greatest obstacle. We must see it for what it is, the operating system of a different species. It was perfect for them, for their time, and for their purpose. But it is not ours. The first step towards living correctly as a nine-centered being is to recognize the cage of the strategic mind that we have been placed in. It's only by seeing the bars of this inherited prison that we can begin to find the key to our own unique and authentic life, a life beyond the limitations of fear-based strategy. Thousands of years ago, long before the end of the seven-centered era, there were voices of profound awareness that saw the trajectory of humanity with, honestly, chilling clarity. Among the most prescient of these was the philosopher Lao Tzu, whose teachings reveal an extraordinary grasp of the cosmic order. He recognized that there was a natural flow to life, a harmonious way of being that he called the Tao. He understood that existence possessed an intrinsic intelligence, and that aligning with this natural order was the key to peace and correctness. But Lao Tzu also saw a great enemy rising to challenge this harmony, an enemy that was growing in power and influence within the human psyche, threatening to sever humanity's connection to its authentic nature. This enemy, which he identified with a sense of terror, was not an external force like a rival kingdom or a natural disaster. It was something far more insidious, something born from within the human being itself. The enemy, as Lao Tzu saw it with such remarkable foresight, was the mind. He perceived that the strategic, calculating mind was beginning to usurp the role of life itself, placing its own logic and desires above the natural order of the Tao. He saw that this burgeoning power of the mind would inevitably lead humanity further and further away from a state of natural harmony, pulling people out of the flow of their own lives and into a world of artificial constructs and endless striving. He saw precisely what the mind was going to do to the world. He foresaw that its relentless need to analyze, plan, and control would create a reality filled with chaos, pain, suffering, and delusion. He understood that the mind's strategic nature would lead to humiliation, conflict, and all the deep-seated miseries that are now an accepted part of the world we live in today. This is the very world that the seven-centered being bequeathed to us. It is the end result of a species that gave absolute authority to its strategic intellect. We are still living within the framework of this legacy, bowing down to the philosophies, religions, and moral codes created by these seven-centered thinkers who were in the grip of the very enemy Lao Tzu warned us about. Most of the world continues to operate according to this ancient and outdated program, a program that venerates the strategic mind above all else. We are still guided by the words of seven-centered prophets, ruled by the laws of seven-centered politicians, and judged by the ethics of seven-centered moralists. Their world was built on the power of the mind to conquer and control, a power that Lao Tzu recognized as the ultimate source of disharmony. His warning echoes through the millennia, a profound insight into the fundamental dilemma of a species that became dangerously infatuated with its own cleverness, losing its connection to the simple mechanical truth of being. Everything about the nature of the seven-centered being was exclusively and relentlessly oriented to the strategic. This was not a choice but a mechanical imperative, the very definition of their being. Their purpose was to conquer, to manipulate the environment, and to triumph over every obstacle, whether it was a saber-toothed tiger, a harsh climate, or a rival tribe. The ultimate goal of this strategic drive was to stand on the peak of the existential mountain and declare, "We rule this world." This obsession with control was the engine of their evolution, and the foundational principle upon which they built their civilizations. It was a consciousness designed for mastery, a powerful tool for survival in a dangerous and unpredictable world. But what happens when that strategic mind achieves its goal? What happens when all the beasts of the field bow down, when nature has been tamed, and when the external threats have been largely neutralized? The strategic mind does not simply turn off and rest in a state of peaceful satisfaction. Its nature is to strategize and to conquer. So, when there are no more external enemies to overcome, it turns its focus inward, upon its own kind. The seven-centered beings, having mastered their environment, began to use their formidable strategic power to rule each other. The same intelligence that led to brilliant hunting techniques and agricultural innovations was then applied to warfare, subjugation, and the creation of rigid social hierarchies. This is the inevitable trajectory of the purely strategic way. The powerful tools of nuanced communication and focused binocular vision, which gave them such an advantage over other species, became instruments of bloodshed and horror when directed at their fellow humans. The strategic mind knows no other way. It is designed to identify a problem or a goal and formulate a plan to achieve it, often without regard for the collateral damage. This is not us, or at least, it is not the totality of what we, as nine-centered beings, are. Yet this is the path that our teachers, our politicians, and our leaders continue to guide us down, because they themselves are lost in the labyrinth of the strategic mind. They are all deeply afraid, operating from the ancient splenic fears that demand control as the only antidote. They are all desperately trying to control the world, to manage outcomes, and to secure their position. What does that sound like? It sounds like the mind itself. The very thing that made Lao Tzu so afraid, the enemy that he saw so clearly, is the same enemy that stands in the way of our own evolution. It is the strategic mind, obsessed with its plans and its fears, that prevents you as an individual from achieving your unique signature. It is the greatest obstacle standing between you and the authentic life that is your birthright as a nine-centered being. The mind's obsession is with strategies. It's a relentless machine, constantly churning, trying to deal with its endless catalog of fears and the myriad things it thinks it needs, wants, should have, or could have had. It replays grievances, concocts future scenarios, and generates endless commentary on things it believes it should be annoyed about, angry about, or deeply concerned with. This is the background noise of the not-self mind, a constant stream of strategic calculation rooted in the seven-centered legacy. It is a mind that believes its survival, and yours, depends entirely on its ability to figure everything out. This is the great trap, the illusion that has held humanity captive for millennia. One of the great cosmic jokes revealed in human design can be seen in the nature of the head center, the center of pressure for inspiration and questions. A staggering 70% of humanity, which is approximately 4.9 billion people on the planet today, are born with an undefined or open head center. The mechanical theme of the open head center is that it is designed to take in inspiration from the world around it, but its not self-strategy is to spend all its time thinking about things that do not matter. The sheer volume of mental energy that human beings expend on thoughts that have absolutely no bearing on their actual lives is almost incomprehensible. It is a colossal waste of our precious life force. All of this mental chatter, all this preoccupation with irrelevant questions and anxieties, is the residue of the past. It is all old seven-centered stuff. It's the echo of a consciousness that was designed to be constantly vigilant and strategic, a mind that could not afford to rest. But it has absolutely nothing to do with what it is to be a nine-centered being, here and now, in this new evolutionary epoch. We are not designed to be consumed by the endless strategic machinations of the mind. Our purpose is not to be lost in a fog of questions that are not ours to answer, driven by a pressure to think about things that are ultimately meaningless to our personal journey. This constant mental activity creates a deep-seated anxiety, a feeling that we must find an answer, that we must solve the puzzle of our lives with our minds. This pressure fuels the not-self, keeping us locked in a state of confusion and dissatisfaction. We become addicted to the mental process itself, believing that if we just think hard enough, we will arrive at the correct decision or the perfect plan. This is the great propaganda of the seven-centered world, a lie that keeps us disconnected from the true source of our wisdom, which lies not in the mind, but in the authority of our unique physical form. One of the most profound revelations within the mechanics of human design is that the nine-centered being is not here to be preoccupied with fear. The very existence of a system like human design, a manual that lays out the mechanics of our being with such precision, is proof that we are no longer meant to live in the dark. Ignorance is what breeds fear, and we have been given the tools to move beyond ignorance. We are designed to be able to operate with clarity and ease on this plane, not to be crippled by the ancient anxieties of our ancestors. The path to this ease is incredibly simple and mechanical. It is your strategy and authority. It is not a philosophy to believe in, but a simple mechanism to experiment with. In stark contrast, the not-self mind is endlessly complex, perpetually confused and ruled by all the old fears inherited from the seven-centered being. These fears are not just personal psychological issues, they define the very structure of the world we live in. If you look at the seven gates of the splenic center, you will see that each one corresponds to a fundamental fear: the fear of inadequacy, the fear of responsibility, the fear of the past, the fear of judgment, the fear of failure, the fear of death. These are not just abstract concepts, they are the primary tools used by our society to control us. They are the levers that politicians, advertisers, and authorities pull to manipulate the masses. It is these very fears that our own minds then turn against us, creating an inner tyrant that constantly pushes us to find a mental solution. Isn't your mind always busy with the same kind of strategic chatter? Well, maybe we should do this to avoid that problem. No, what if they do that instead? We need a backup plan. I need to figure out how to get there, how to achieve that, how to protect myself. On and on it goes, a ceaseless internal monologue dedicated to planning, plotting, and strategizing its way through a life it perceives as hostile and threatening. This is the trap of the strategic mind, the prison built from the fears of the spleen. It is not what we are about. Here is a truly radical thought. You do not need your mind to keep you alive. It's funny, isn't it? Because that is what everybody on this planet truly believes. We have been conditioned to think that our mind is running our life, that our mind is our life, but it is not. Your mind is a passenger in your vehicle, not the driver. It carries with it the beautiful potential for you to participate in the great cosmic movie as an observer, to witness the unfolding of your life with awareness. But this ability to simply observe, to just see, is an attribute of rightness, not leftness. It is receptive, not strategic. The legacy of the seven-centered being is a world built on homogenization. The strategic mind, in its quest for control, cannot tolerate uniqueness and diversity, as they are unpredictable and difficult to manage. How do you think those beings who strategically claw their way to the top of any hierarchy manage to stay there? They spend all of their time and energy figuring out how to control those who are below them. This is the fundamental principle of seven-centered civilization, and nothing has changed in that regard. It is still the same game being played out on a global scale. Every single civilization on this planet is constructed with layer upon layer of control mechanisms, all designed to maintain the existing power structures. And what is the result of living in such a world? Everybody is trying to figure out how to beat the game. Life becomes a strategic competition, a race to climb over others before they climb over you. This is the dog-eat-dog mentality, the survival of the fittest worldview that we inherited directly from our seven-centered ancestors. This is the natural expression of a species that was ruled by the deep existential fears of the spleen. It was the logical outcome of the first encounter with self-reflected consciousness, and it demonstrates how easily and how quickly the mind was able to take over the entire show, appointing itself as the absolute ruler of the human experience. Just look at yourself and be honest. Isn't the mind the only thing you truly count on? Isn't it the source of your security, the framework through which you interpret every experience, the tool you use to make every decision? For the seven-centered being, the power of the mind became so seductive, so utterly compelling, that they did exactly what Lao Tzu feared. They destroyed the great harmony. They traded the wisdom of the body and the flow of the Tao for the illusion of mental control. And the result is the world we see today, a world of breathtaking technological achievement built upon a foundation of psychological suffering, environmental destruction, and endless conflict. This is the world created by seven-centered strategic control mechanisms. This control is not just about controlling people's bodies, it's about controlling their minds. You feed them the information you want them to have, you stoke the fears you want them to feel, and you provide them with the beliefs that will keep them compliant and predictable. You create a homogenized consciousness. This is not who we are. We, as nine-centered beings, are not here to be slaves to our minds. We are here to put the mind in its proper place, to demote it from its position as the tyrannical ruler of our lives, and allow it to become a beautiful tool for outer authority and shared awareness. The world we live in is a byproduct of the mind's distortion, the collective manifestation of the not-self. The great joke, the great tragic comedy that arose out of the seven-centered consciousness is its ultimate sentiment. When you think about this being, driven by fear and the relentless mechanism of a strategic mind, when you consider its control, its distortion of everything natural, its incredible savageness towards both other species and its own kind, and then you hear its purported highest ideal, you have to laugh. The great sentiment of this creature, the moral pinnacle it claimed to strive for was, "Love thy neighbor." Is that not profoundly funny? It's a goal that its very nature made impossible. Human design offers a much more practical and necessary starting point. Love thyself, please. Let's begin there with the mechanics of our own being. Everything about the seven-centered being led them to be profoundly homogenized through the power of mind. Think about the enormous nations we have in the world today with vast populations, all of whom can receive the same information at the exact same time through mass media. They are molded together, made to think the same thoughts, feel the same fears, and desire the same things. It's an incredible spectacle of mass control. They are conditioned to bow down at the same time and to rise up at the same time. You say jump and they ask how high? How many millions of young men and women jump without question when some old strategic mind says go to war? Jump. We are not these creatures. I have always had a personal and admittedly pejorative name for the seven-centered being. To me, they are the killer monkey. I am not a killer monkey. You are not a killer monkey. Now it is not their fault. Again, there is no one to blame in this vast evolutionary movie. It is simply a process unfolding. But if you do not see it for what it is, if you do not recognize that you are not that creature, then you are truly lost. You will be like the vast majority of humanity who are still unconsciously playing out these killer monkey roles right to the very end, like lemmings marching dutifully over the cliff's edge. This entire legacy of fear, control, and conflict comes down to one thing and one thing only: the mind and its illegitimate role in making decisions. There is no great secret here, no complex spiritual mystery to unravel. It is not about anything other than the simple mechanics of decision-making. I am always flabbergasted, no matter how profound the knowledge is that I can share, no matter how deep I can go into the mechanics. I always have to come back to the same simple starting point. It is the only place to begin. It is the only catalyst for true change. If you do not let go of your mind controlling your life, you have absolutely nowhere to go. You will just be another killer monkey in the global circus. The year 1781 stands as a monumental demarcation point in the evolutionary story of humanity. It was in this year, coinciding with the astronomer William Herschel's discovery of the planet Uranus, that a profound global mutation took place, altering the very blueprint of what it means to be human. According to the knowledge revealed through the human design system, this event triggered the end of the seven-centered being's long reign and heralded the arrival of a new species onto this plane. The first of the nine-centered beings began to be born, carrying within their genetic makeup a new and more complex energetic architecture. This was not a gradual, subtle shift, it was a definitive and radical change in the production line of humanity, a quantum leap in our evolutionary trajectory that has been unfolding ever since. Since that pivotal year, every single human being that has come into the world has been a nine-centered being. The old seven-centered model, which had so successfully dominated the planet for over 80,000 years, was retired permanently. While it is true that seven-centered individuals continued to live out their natural lifespans, with the last likely passing away in the late 1800s, the era itself had concluded. We are the new model. This fact alone is one of the most transformative pieces of information that human design offers, as it fundamentally reframes our understanding of ourselves and our place in history. We are not simply a more advanced version of our ancestors, we are a different kind of being altogether, with a different purpose and a different potential for awareness. The seven-centered being was a creature of the left, a master of strategy and focus, driven by the fear-based intelligence of the spleen. Their entire orientation was to conquer and control the environment to ensure their survival. We can see this in the great evolutionary pendulum that swings between left and right. The more receptive, right-oriented Neanderthals were supplanted by the strategically superior left-oriented seven-centered humans. They were so effective that they built the entire foundation of what we call civilization. All our major religions, political systems, philosophies, and moral codes were conceived and established by them, for them. They were the architects of the world we have inherited. The moment you truly grasp the significance of this transition, a profound and unsettling realization begins to dawn. We, as nine-centered beings, are not exclusively left-oriented creatures. While we still possess leftness as part of our heritage and our individual design, we also have a fully developed potential for rightness. We are a far more complex and nuanced form of life, a synthesis of the past and the future. This complexity, however, presents us with a terrible dilemma. The emerging rightness that has been a part of our genetic makeup since 1781 has been almost completely overwhelmed and suppressed by the conditioning and programming left behind by the seven-centered species. We are born as nine-centered beings into a seven-centered world. The transition from a seven-centered to a nine-centered being was not arbitrary. It was the result of a specific mutation that profoundly altered the way our awareness system functions. This mutation took place within the Ajna center, the hub of our conceptual intelligence, and it specifically impacted the way our visual processing system works. This change is the key to understanding the fundamental difference between our species and our ancestors. It redefined the very architecture of our perception, opening up a new potential for awareness that was unavailable to the seven-centered being. This was not merely an upgrade, it was a complete rewiring of the cognitive system, designed to move us beyond the limitations of purely strategic consciousness. The seven-centered being was equipped with what we can call a strategic, focused mind. When they entered a room or looked out upon a landscape, their perception was designed to lock onto specific details. This ability to focus intensely was their greatest strength. It allowed them to isolate a target, analyze it, and formulate a plan of action. However, this strength came with an inherent limitation. The intensity of their focus on a single point meant that everything else in their field of vision, the periphery, became less distinct, blurry, and of secondary importance. Their awareness was like a spotlight, brilliantly illuminating one area while leaving the surroundings in relative darkness. This was the perfect tool for a species that needed to conquer and control. This focused perception also determined how they stored information. When a strategic left-oriented person takes in an experience through this focused lens, they store the memory on a singular linear track. We call this type of storage memory. If you ask that person about the experience a day later, their mind will go directly back to that single line of focused data. They will recall the object of their focus with great clarity, but the peripheral details will be faint or entirely absent. They remember the main point, the strategic element, but not the whole picture. This is an efficient system for retaining mission-critical information, but it lacks richness and context. This mutation in the ajna center prepared the ground for the emergence of a completely different way of perceiving and recording reality. It was the dawn of the receptive being. The new, nine-centered human vehicle was designed with the potential for a different kind of vision, one that is not dependent on a narrow focus. This new awareness does not need to lock onto a single point to the exclusion of all others. Instead, it is designed to be open, to take in the entire environment without differentiation or hierarchy. This shift from focus to peripheral vision, from strategic to receptive awareness, is the essential mechanical difference between them and us, and it changes everything about how we are designed to navigate the world. Section 3, Focused Vision versus Receptive Awareness. Two ways of seeing. The receptive being, the potential of the nine-centered human, sees the world in a fundamentally different way. Where the strategic being focuses, the receptive being absorbs. There is no single point of intense focus, no deliberate cutting away of the periphery. Instead, there is a panoramic openness, an awareness that simply takes everything in as a whole. Imagine walking into a room as a receptive being. You do not lock onto the person speaking or the most interesting object. Instead, you absorb the entire gestalt of the room, the light, the sounds, the mood, the spatial relationships between all the people and objects, all at once. It is a holistic, non-discriminating form of perception. This difference in perception leads to a radically different way of storing experience. The receptive, right-oriented being does not store information on a single linear track of memory. Because they do not differentiate or focus on one thing over another, they take in the entire sensory tapestry of the moment. It is all there. They do not cut away the periphery in the way they take in information, they just absorb it all. The experience is stored not as a focused memory but as a rich, multi-layered imprint. This is why a right-oriented person may not be able to recall a specific detail on command, but when triggered by the right context, the entire experience can come flooding back with incredible sensory richness. These two ways of being, the left and the right, are so different in their mechanics. The left, with its focused intake, stores data on a singular line which we call memory. You can ask that person a question, and they can go straight back to their resource file for that single focus and retrieve the data. They may not remember all the stuff around the point of focus, or only faintly, but the key information is readily accessible. The right, however, takes it all in. They do not differentiate, they do not focus, and they do not cut away any part of the experience. They are different. We, as a species, are different now because we carry the potential for both. I think one of the most difficult things about what it is to be a human being in this day and age is that all of our role models, all of our historical heroes have nothing to do with us. The world that we live in and the way that the not-self mind operates is a direct legacy of the seven-centered being, a being that was purely strategic and focused. You can see the inner conflict of this dilemma in those beings who, at some point in their life, suddenly realize there is something deeply wrong here. They can feel it in their bones, a sense of profound unease, but they do not know what it is. The truth is simple. We are not seven-centered beings, and trying to live like them is a recipe for suffering. Section 4. The Dilemma of Complexity. Living in a seven-centered world. The world we have inherited, with all its cultures, religions, gods, and societal structures, is the story of the seven-centered being. It is their story, written by them, for them. It has absolutely nothing to do with us. One of the most profound and challenging pieces of knowledge that human design carries is this simple fact. We are a different species than those beings born before 1781. This is what makes human design so extraordinary and so vital for our time. It is the first body of knowledge that is here specifically to educate our own kind, to guide nine-centered beings in understanding their unique mechanics and to help us navigate our way out from under the crushing dominance of the seven-centered legacy. And what is the essence of that seven-centered legacy? It is a simple, brutal formula. You use your fear to drive your intelligence. And you use that intelligence to strategically control the world around you. Your world. Whether it is a small world consisting of your immediate family and workplace, or a huge world like a multinational corporation or a nation-state, the underlying principle is the same. You take charge, you make plans, and you control through the strategic application of fear and intellect. This is the operating system that runs the homogenized not-self world. It is the program that is installed in us from the moment we are born, despite the fact that our hardware has been fundamentally upgraded. This creates a profound inner conflict for the nine-centered being. We are born with the potential for a deep receptive awareness, an ability to surrender to the flow of life and operate from a place of inner authority. Yet we are relentlessly conditioned to believe that we must be in control, that we must use our minds to figure everything out, and that our lives will only be successful if we have a solid strategic plan. This pressure to be something we are not is the source of the deep-seated anxiety, frustration, anger, and disappointment that characterizes the lives of so many people on this planet. We are trying to run a sophisticated multi-core operating system on a simple binary command line interface. The average human being's mind is a testament to this conflict. What does it do all day? It acts as a moment-to-moment control mechanism. It is constantly trying to control its fate, its destiny. It is trying to control the people around it, control its future, and even control and rewrite its past. The mind will lie, it will cheat, it will trick, and it will do absolutely anything in its power to maintain the illusion of control. This obsessive need for control is not a personal failing, it is the ghost of the seven-centered being operating within us, the echo of a species for whom control was the only path to survival. But for us, it is the primary obstacle to a life of peace and correctness. Section 5. Breaking the mold. Why old models no longer fit. Think about that moment when a decision or a situation presents itself to you. The greatest heresy one can introduce into the modern world is not a challenge to a specific religion or political ideology, but a direct challenge to the authority of the mind itself. The practical application of this new paradigm is astonishingly simple. If the solution is so simple, why does it appear to be so difficult for so many people to embrace it? The answer is that we are living in a world that is profoundly addicted to the seven-centered way of being. When the mind is finally liberated from the impossible burden of having to run your life, it does not simply wither away or become useless. Instead, it is freed to fulfill its true and beautiful purpose, to become a source of outer authority. My mind is not useful to me for making my own decisions. I know this from decades of experience. My mind, if left in charge, would make decisions that are not correct for me, leading to struggle and resistance. I have lived that movie, and I have no desire to see it again. However, this does not mean my mind is not a valuable and enjoyable instrument. In fact, now that it no longer has to carry the weight of my life, I am at peace with its delights. The idealized expression of the nine-centered mind is to be an objective observer and a unique source of awareness for others. Once your life is guided by your strategy and authority, your mind is free to simply see, without the distortion of personal attachment and fear. It can analyze, conceptualize, and articulate its unique perspective without the pressure of having to come up with an answer for you. This is what I am doing right now. I am sharing my outer authority with you. My mind can be very useful to you as a source of information and perspective, but it is not useful to me as an inner decision maker. This is the great paradox and the great gift of the correctly functioning mind. Think of the potential for humanity if more and more people began to operate in this way. Imagine a world filled with unique individuals, each living out their own differentiated path, guided by their inner authority. Their minds, freed from the neurotic task of self-preservation, could then become incredible resources for one another. We could share our observations, our insights, and our unique ways of seeing without trying to convince or control anyone. Communication would transform from a battle of strategic arguments into a rich tapestry of shared perspectives. This is the potential of a world where outer authority is respected and inner authority is honored. This is the rightful place for the mind. It is here to be a passenger, to enjoy the view from the window of your vehicle and to offer commentary on the journey. It is here to be a research tool, a communication device, and a source of inspiration for others. But it is not the driver. It does not hold the map, and it does not know the destination. The great magic begins when you can finally relax into this truth, when you can allow your body to lead and your mind to follow. This is when you begin to experience the peace and satisfaction that comes from living in alignment with your true nature, and your mind finally finds its own peace in its correct role. The journey of moving from mind-based decisions to living by strategy and authority is not always comfortable. In fact, in the beginning, it can be profoundly unsettling. As one of my students described it, recognizing the depth of your conditioning and watching it operate within you is a deeply uncomfortable experience. It is like waking up to the fact that you have been wearing an ill-fitting, ugly suit your entire life, a suit that was never yours, and that has caused you nothing but discomfort. Stripping away this old skin, the layers of not-self habits and beliefs that have accumulated over years, can be a painful and disorienting process. This discomfort is a necessary part of the transformation. It is the friction that arises when your emerging authentic self pushes against the hardened shell of your conditioning. For decades your mind has been running the show, and it will not relinquish control without a fight. It will throw all of its old fears and anxieties at you, trying to pull you back into the familiar patterns of strategic thinking. You will see with painful clarity how incredibly conditioned your whole life has been. Your choices, your relationships, your beliefs. Yes, it is uncomfortable. But this discomfort is a sign of healing. It is the feeling of a wound being cleaned so that it can finally heal correctly. It is essential to be patient and compassionate with yourself during this process. You are unlearning a lifetime of programming. You are breaking an addiction that is reinforced by the entire world around you. There will be moments of doubt and moments of failure. But with each decision you make correctly, with each moment you choose to trust your authority over your mind, you weaken the grip of the past. You begin to build a new muscle, a muscle of self-trust and surrender, and gradually, the discomfort begins to be replaced by a new feeling, a sense of peace, a feeling of rightness, a quiet confidence that you are on the correct path. I know how easy it can be to be here on this plane, oh do I know, and it is not because of what I do, but because the doing gets done through me. This is what happens when you finally let go of needing your mind to be your security blanket, when you stop trying to control every outcome. You stop fighting the river of life and you learn to flow with it. The discomfort of deconditioning is the price of admission to this state of grace. It is the shedding of the old skin of the seven-centered being, so that the true form of the nine-centered being, your true form, can finally emerge into the light. Ultimately, this entire journey is about one thing: awareness. The great magic is not in finding the right answers or creating the perfect life plan. The great magic is when you are no longer lost and identified with the character in the movie, but you can sit back and see the movie itself. This is the shift from being an unconscious actor, buffeted by the slings and arrows of a seemingly random plot, to becoming the witness of your own life's unfolding. And when you can see the movie from this perspective, you realize it is not a horror film filled with threats that you must control. It is your bioflick, your unique movie, and it is a masterpiece of what is possible for you when you get out of your own way. This is the state of witness consciousness, and it is the great gift of the nine-centered being. This was not the trip for our seven-centered ancestors. Their journey was like that of a child who has just discovered a powerful and dangerous tool. Wow, look at this mind. Look what it can do. They were mesmerized by its power, and it quickly took them over. The earliest Greeks believed their thoughts were the voices of the gods speaking through them. Within a few centuries they had decided that their own minds were good enough to control the world. Oh, the seduction of the mind and how quickly it became the master. For us, the journey is to move beyond that seduction. This consciousness is not something you can control or strategize your way into. It is a byproduct of living correctly according to your design. When you surrender to your strategy and authority, you are no longer caught up in the mental drama of trying to figure everything out. This frees up your awareness. You can begin to watch your life unfold with a sense of wonder and detachment. You can see the perfection of the mechanics, the way the right people and opportunities appear precisely when they are meant to. You witness the perfection of your movie, and you realize you could never have written a script this brilliant with your little strategic mind. This is the liberation. It is the understanding that you are not here to be in control, but to be aware. You're here to experience the richness of your life, not to manage it. This is the paradigm shift from the seven-centered being, who is obsessed with doing, to the nine-centered being, whose potential lies in being. By moving beyond the need for control and embracing the simple mechanics of your strategy and authority, you open the door to this profound state of witness consciousness. You get to see the magic, and in seeing it, you become a part of it in the most beautiful and effortless way. We have journeyed through the vast expanse of human history, seen through the mechanical lens of human design. We have traced our lineage back to the seven-centered being, a creature of strategy and fear, a being I have pejoratively named the killer monkey. We have seen how their world, their philosophies, their religions, and their very way of thinking have been passed down to us, creating a global conditioning field that pressures us to live as they did. It is a world built on the premise that the mind must be in control, that life is a problem to be solved, and that fear is the primary motivator for action. This is the legacy we are born into, a cage of consciousness constructed by a different species. The final and most profound heresy is to recognize this legacy for what it is, and to consciously choose to leave it behind. This is not an act of condemnation. There is no blame in this evolutionary movie. The seven-centered being was a necessary and perfect expression of its time, a master of survival in a hostile world, but their time is over. We are a new form of life, a nine-centered being, designed not for strategic control but for receptive awareness. To continue to live by their rules is to deny our own nature, to condemn ourselves to a life of inner conflict, resistance, and suffering. Letting go of the killer monkey is not about destroying the past, it is about refusing to allow the past to destroy your present and your future. It is about recognizing that their tools, their fears, and their strategies are no longer appropriate for the journey we are on. The vast majority of humanity is still lost in this ancestral role-playing, marching in lockstep to the drumbeat of the strategic mind. They are the lemmings going over the cliff, driven by fears that are not their own and chasing goals that will never bring them fulfillment. It all comes down to the mind. It does not come down to anything else. There is no great secret to uncover, no complex spiritual discipline to master. The entire illusion is propped up by one simple, deeply ingrained lie, that your mind is who you are, and that you need it to make decisions to survive. If you do not let go of your mind controlling your life, you have nowhere to go. You will simply be another killer monkey in the global circus. This choice to let go is the ultimate act of self-love and personal rebellion. It is to declare that you are not a creature of fear. You are not here to conquer and control. You are here to awaken to the beauty and perfection of your own unique form. It is to understand that the mind, with all its cleverness, will lie to you, cheat you, and fool you. It will bring you endless pain and suffering, and you will have the cold comfort of commiserating with everyone else who is also caught in the same trap. Or, you can choose a different path. You can choose to step out of the circus, to leave the killer monkey behind, and to begin the journey of discovering what it truly means to be you. The thing that I always find so startling after all these years and all the complexity I have explored is how incredibly simple the catalyst for this transformation is. And yet, because of its simplicity, it often appears to be the most difficult thing for people to grasp. The way out of the seven-centered prison is not through deep psychoanalysis, years of therapy, or the adoption of a new belief system. The key, the only key, is your strategy and authority. It is everything. And it is everything because it is the mechanism that takes decision-making away from your mind. The moment your mind stops making decisions, you begin to decondition from the killer monkey program, and you finally get your own life back. This is not a philosophy you are asked to believe. It is a personal experiment you are invited to try. It is purely mechanical. When you enter into the experiment of following your strategy and authority, you begin to gather your own empirical evidence. You get to see, in the laboratory of your own life, that you do indeed possess a capacity to make decisions correctly without your mind's interference. You get to witness that there is a place within your own body, a reliable and consistent inner authority, that has the ability to guide you perfectly along your unique trajectory. This is not something I'm making up. It is something you can experience for yourself. Just the fact that you can see this, that you can experience it even once in your experiment, is telling you something of profound importance. It is revealing the existence of a guidance system you did not even know you had, something that was always there, buried beneath the noise of your conditioned mind. This is the system that is designed to make your life. This is the dominance of the mind at work, It is so loud and so persuasive that it has hidden your own truth from you. Strategy and authority is so essential because it cuts right through the noise. It does not require your mind's participation, and it will immediately begin to show you, experientially, that you can make decisions that work for you, that are correct for you, and that will transform your life process. I'm always flabbergasted by how profound the knowledge is, and yet I always come back to this simple starting point, because it is the only place to begin, it is the only catalyst. The depth of the complexity of what it is to be a nine-centered being is extraordinary. We are very special because we are not a singularity. We are not just that left-oriented strategic thing from the past. We are a deeply complex combination of potentials, a synthesis of leftness and rightness in a whole new mutative package. But you can never experience this depth, this beauty, this correctness, until you begin the simple experiment of honoring your form and letting your body lead the way. When you begin this experiment, when you hand the reins of your life over to your strategy and authority, something magical happens to your mind. Freed from the crushing responsibility of having to navigate your life, the nine-centered mind begins to awaken to its true and beautiful purpose. It begins to take its rightful place not as the driver but as the passenger. It can then begin to analyze and see the world without the distortion of fear and personal attachment. The mind, instead of being a source of anxiety and confusion, becomes a tool for the refined expression of awareness. This is the promise of the correctly functioning nine-centered mind, the potential for pure outer authority. My mind can be very useful to you, but it is not useful to me for making my own decisions. It has been over 2 decades since my mind has made a decision for me, and I do not live that way. And yet it is not to say that this mind is not beautiful and enjoyable to have. I am very at peace with the delights of my mind now that it is no longer my master. I look around me and I see everyone else in torment, caught in the endless mind game, the internal rattling of a conditioned consciousness. I see them struggling to control a life that was never meant to be controlled, and I know how easy it is to be here on this plane when you let go of that struggle. The great magic is awareness. It is all about seeing. The magic happens when you are no longer caught up in the drama of the movie, but you can sit back and see the movie itself. You realize it is not a horror movie, it is your bioflip, your unique story, and it is unfolding with a perfection that your mind could never have conceived. This is the state of witness consciousness that we, as nine-centered beings, are here to experience. It is not something you can achieve through mental effort. It is the natural byproduct of living correctly, of surrendering to the wisdom of your form. You cannot control the movie, but you can witness it in all its glory. This was not the journey of the seven-centered being. Their trip was about discovering the power of the tool of mind. Our journey is about putting that tool in its proper place so that we can discover the power of awareness itself. We are here to witness the perfection of what is possible in our movie, a story that is not written by us but is written for us. This shift in perspective, from actor to witness, is the ultimate liberation. It is the peace that passes all understanding, a peace that is not dependent on external circumstances, but on the internal alignment with one's own true nature. It is the gift that awaits anyone willing to take the leap out of their mind and into their authority. It is essential to understand that the shift from a seven-centered to a nine-centered being was not just a change in consciousness, it was a profound biological mutation. If we had reliable body temperature figures for humans born before and after 1781, we would see that the nine-centered being is literally hotter. We run at a higher frequency. This heating up is not an accident, it is part of a larger evolutionary process. Mutation thrives on heat. Since the Industrial Revolution began to gain momentum around the same time we emerged, the planet itself has been heating up. This phenomenon of global warming, while presenting immense challenges, is, from a mechanical perspective, absolutely natural. It is the planet creating the perfect mutative medium for the next evolutionary step. We are a hot, mutative species. This is where the potential of our atomic structure, the very building blocks of our form, is designed to fulfill its purpose. We are living in a time of immense heat and pressure, building towards the next great mutative cycle change in 2027. We are a long way from what the seven-centered being was. We have very little in common with that creature. We run hotter, we have different digestive requirements, and we possess a vast new potential for sensory and cognitive awareness. And yet, look at the world we live in. We are still slaves to all the old seven-centered thinkers, their stories, their laws, and their fears. Think of it like a science fiction movie. Imagine you are a new, advanced species living on a planet that was once inhabited by more primitive aliens. Yet, for some insane reason, you are still trying to live according to their ancient customs, worshipping their old gods and obeying their outdated laws even though they are no longer there. This is the bizarre reality of the homogenized, not-self world. It is operating as a collective, seven-centered strategic creature, and we are not that. We have not been that for over 240 years. It is indeed time to wake up to what we are now. Everything about my work is rooted in the practical, in the experiential. It has to be. The moment you enter into the experiment of strategy and authority, you begin to align with your new, nine-centered form. You begin to cool down the overheated, anxious mind and allow the natural heat of your mutative vehicle to operate correctly. You step out of the illusion of the past and into the living reality of your present form. You are a mutative being designed for transformation. But this mutation can only unfold correctly when you are living in alignment with your design, navigating with the precision of your inner authority. So here we are, at the end of this exploration, but at the beginning of a profound potential for you. The human design system is not another set of beliefs to add to the scrap heap of the mind. It is not another philosophy to be debated. It is a direct and personal invitation to engage in an experiment that can transform your life from the inside out. It is an invitation to leave the inherited trauma of the killer monkey behind, and to step into the grace and awareness of your nine-centered self. It is an invitation to stop trying to control your life, and to start witnessing the perfection of the life that is waiting for you. The path begins with the simple mechanics of your strategy and authority. It is the only place to start, the only catalyst that works. By honoring the way your vehicle is designed to operate, you begin a process of deconditioning that will slowly but surely strip away the layers of not-self that have obscured your true nature. It is a journey back to yourself, a journey that requires courage, patience, and a willingness to trust your own form above all else. It is the most important journey you will ever take, for it is the journey to the life that is truly yours. We are not here to be slaves to our minds. We are not here to live in fear. We are not here to be homogenized cogs in a machine built by a species that is no longer here. We are here to be aware. We are here to express our unique, differentiated consciousness. We are here to be the witnesses of our own magnificent movie. This is the promise of the nine-centered being. It is the promise of a life lived with ease, with peace, and with a deep sense of purpose that does not come from the mind, but from the simple, profound correctness of being. The invitation is open. The knowledge is here. The tools are simple and practical. The rest is up to you. Will you continue to live in the shadow of the past, playing out the role of a killer monkey in a world of fear and control? Or will you accept the invitation to awaken to what you truly are? A magnificent, unique, and aware nine-centered being, here to witness the unfolding of your own perfection. The choice, as always, is not in your mind. It is in your willingness to begin the experiment and see for yourself. Love thyself. It all begins there.